Okay, great, guys. So, guess we're good to go.
We are live.
Awesome, guys. So, definitely, we always looking forward to having these amazing conversation among a wonderful group of people, and that's one of the good thing about this community, guys. When we are able to have these, interaction among us ourselves. So, today, in our weekly cybersecurity article review for Thursday, August 24, 2023, we seek to provide some insights into the importance of having an organizational. Uh, Let me see what's happening. Oh, okay, great. Where was I? Okay, back on track. So, as I was saying, guys, we seek to gain some insight into the importance of having an organizational structure that aligns with helping cybersecurity programs achieve intended business or organizational objectives. And in a survey done by Delineate, a 2022 survey, they found that only 38% of organizations have a fully aligned cybersecurity and business strategy. And the question is, what's happening with the other 72%, you might ask? So, very important to note is that, as we all know, a successful cyber attack can have a devastating consequence. Including financial losses. We're talking about reputational damage, and the list goes on. So, that's why it's definitely very important for organizations to have a strong cybersecurity program in place. But having a strong cybersecurity program is definitely not enough. Therefore, organizations definitely must have a structure that is aligned with the program in order to be truly effective. So, guys, in all of this, then the big questions that I have, based on this 38% that I've actually mentioned earlier, what are the challenges to making this happen within organizations or businesses? What are the benefits of actually having an organizational structure that is aligned with cybersecurity? And within the overall organizational structure, how should a well structured organizational chart segment be organized to deliver cybersecurity effectively in terms of communication? And the list goes on. So we have Jonathan Fisher, we have Omar Carter, we have Paul Robinson, who will be providing their perspectives on these questions and many more, insights to this overall um, um, topic that we're actually focusing on. So, guys, thanks for joining us on the CyberJA article review. So, before we actually, get into the meat of the matter, just want to say, guys, feel free to, ask your question, make your comments. So, guys, what's your take on this overall topic that we are focusing on at this point?
Well, I think we all agree that something is broken, something isn't working. So I think we're all aligned there. I think the challenge comes in where the cybersecurity organization and the business, it's even the way we talk, the language we use, right? We don't talk about the CFO and the business. The CFO is a part of the business. The chief HR officer is a part of the business, but somehow cyber is kind of like this exotic, disjointed thing that's coming in and trying to, it's like a sore thumb, a stepchild. And I think it has a lot to do with the mindset of the organization overall and the mindset of the leaders within the cybersecurity space. Young, immature, if you want to use the analogy of a family, which I hate using, but I think it's worth mentioning here. So, like cyber is probably the youngest essential piece of any business that's operating outside of uh, an archaic system, right? You're going to have transactions, you're going to have people online. And I think cyber is still like that, you know, toddler trying to keep up with mom or dad or the rest of the family, right? So you kind of have to pull cyber along. So I think It's going to take a shift in mindset. The status quo is not sustainable given the dynamic nature of business and the even more dynamic nature of cybersecurity. So, like they say, if you change nothing, guess what? Nothing will change. So we really have to kind of take a different, we have to take a different approach because the current status quo is not working. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I this article really got me thinking, and we're always searching for, okay, where do we start in building our cybersecurity program? Where do we start in fixing the disaster known as organizational wide structure? And we'll say risk assessment, or we'll say cloud assessment, or we'll say Microsoft assessment. I really think a incident response tabletop exercise will really bring clarity to how the organizational structure is supposed to function. And when I say incident response tabletop exercise, a lot of people say, "Oh, we did a tabletop exercises with our technical team. The servers melted, and we had to figure out how to restore, respond, and recover from a technical perspective." But a true incident response tabletop exercise includes the whole business. And I think, Chris, while we're in that infancy stage, is because the business just doesn't know. They don't know what the true risk is to the organization. They only see an incident as ransomware or data leakage or things like that. They don't understand, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you have to make decisions that could either elevate the company or destroy the company. I was talking to a business mentor of mine this week. He's a CEO, and great guy, smart guy, but he didn't even consider it. He didn't even consider it. Like 3 a.m. to make a decision to unplug from the internet, that could sink your business. So, organizational structure is a mess. It's a disaster, and we can get into that. But I think using an exercise like a tabletop exercise to get the whole business to know what truly is at stake will then start to bring clarity. Because a CISO should not report to an IT director or a CIO. Just shouldn't do that. But I think we all learn by experience, and having that experience to kind of drive structural change could be good.
Oh, Paul, you jumped. I'm going to jump right off of what you just ended there. Just how should the CISO be in line with all the other executives, right? Should they be under a CIO? I mean, I think I've even seen one or two organizations where they fall under the CTO, and to me that doesn't quite make sense because there's kind of a conflict of interest there where someone's trying to push the product and someone below them is trying to halt it or want to ensure that there's security built into it, there's security built into just a business function and how that can be a delineation of power and that conflict. But yeah, to me, it's one of those things of how mature is that company in developing their security. You know, Security should be one of those top of the mind things. Sometimes it's not, especially for smaller businesses that they're really trying to push their products so that way they can make that good market value to help them, kind of get a foothold in there. And sometimes security is just not part of that. But eventually, someone's going to have to make that decision of when security is going to be important and at what level do they report at, right? Do they have direct access to the CEO and the board to really discuss these issues without having any other, internal conflict trying to quiet them down? Right? Are they, someone that's an equal part on the executive team where they can really share those thoughts and have good discussions without, being quieted? Um, and I've seen it in different ways in my organization currently. The CISO falls under the CIO. And we're in the process now of having a new CIO, and we're going to see how that changes things going forward. But you know, it, it all depends on that maturity. But I definitely think the CISO needs to really be a good part of that executive team. And like what Chris said, the security aspect, we are a little late to the table. We're in that infancy. I like that analogy he put of like a little 5-year-old kid trying to run a keep up. We have great thoughts and great things to add um, to the whole business value. Just trying to make sure that the executive teams can understand that and how we can bring the value to that.
Yeah, I agree, Jonathan. I think it's going to take a concerted effort. It takes two to tango, blah, 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 blah. You could add all the cliches, right? So on one side, I think the CISO has to be mature enough to understand the dynamic within the organization. If you have a CEO who is a dynamic leader who understands that, he understands the bigger picture and is of the mindset that security is a part of my business, those two getting together, it's going to be a nice cocktail of success, right? But if you have some kind of dissonance, or you have some kind of like the ego is in the way, and whatever, incompetency, whatever it is, those are variables that could cause, in some cases, even the CISO to report to the CIO. In my mind, I do see there's some conflict of interest with the CIO having the CISO as a direct report. In fact, I've argued before that the CIO should report to the CISO, right? Because CISO is responsible for what, availability, right? The CIA triad, and the CIO is only responsible for availability, right? So looking at it from that perspective, the CISO has a bigger role, right? Not only is he concerned about availability, integrity, right, confidentiality. So yeah, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I think it's going to take a broad effort for the organization to come to grips with the reality of the environment, as well as with the dynamics within the organization. I don't like the pyramid organizational structure. I think actually leadership. I view an organization more as a tree where leadership is at the root. They set the foundation. Senior management is kind of the trunk of the tree, right? Middle management is the branch, right? And then eventually you're going to get to the fruit and the leaves of the tree. As you go in normal parlance down the organizational structure with the tree, you're going up, all right? And if you have the CISO, the CIO, the CEO, all the C-suite, all on the same page, I think it's going to be a much different conversation, regardless of who the CISO or the CIO reports to. They have values that are driven. They have values that are driven by dynamics within and without, inside and outside of the organization.
And
That's a
I
great
think
point.
where the CISO role. Oh, go ahead, sir. I
Oh,
said I think what
yeah.
I
Go
was
ahead,
just going
Paul.
to add on to that. I think I was going to add to that. I think why the CISO role is so tough is that it's asked to play two parts of a business strategy. And I'm not talking about cybersecurity strategy, but a business strategy. And if you look at how businesses are structured, like Chris just said, you have people that are in middle management that are worried about the day to day, the hour to hour, the second by second operations of the business. So they're making business decisions based on a micro view, like what is it today that gets us to tomorrow. But when you're in an executive role, you're looking at it at more of a macro view. Okay, what is the next 90 days, 3 to 5 years look like for our business? And the CISO kind of has to straddle both. They have to say, okay, I can't have a cyber attack today that will bring us down, but then also he or she has to go into the mindset of, well, how do we transition in this world of rapidly changing technologies? Like I've said before, if we were talking last year at this time, and I was talking to you about Chat GPT, people would be like, well, what does that even mean? Now it's all in our organizations. Like that's the strategic piece of it, of like, okay, how do we prepare for future things, but then also take care of the other things that are along the way. So my opinion is that some of the best security teams that I've seen run is that every branch of CXO has a responsibility to cybersecurity baked into their job description, whether it's operations, whether it's finance, using that CIA triad and applying those principles to their job, because it's not one person. I read an article today, put it on LinkedIn. The human body and the human mind is not structured to handle the stress that it has, and now it's playing its part. 68% of people are, that were interviewed are struggling with mental health and substance abuse. Like, that's not because they have an addictive personality. It's because it's the stress that is pushed on them, because it's yeah. So that's my thought.
Okay, great. Guys, just a question. I mean, not sure which of you would want to undertake this. I think the user is asking, doesn't maybe the leadership or the structure depends on the risk profile of the where a CISO should be situated?
I think to a certain extent it does. Right. So you're looking at like the financial sector, heavily regulated versus a manufacturer, someone who does manufacturing or food and beverages. They're different dynamics, and that's what I was kind of getting into when I said the variables within the environment that would dictate or influence. I wouldn't say dictate, but they would influence how your structure is brought together, how you orchestrate that structure. So I think to a certain extent, it does depend on the risk profile of the company. But largely speaking, if we were to kind of widen that circle, I think the most important thing is for leadership to align. And leadership includes the CISO, not just the other C's, right? And I think to answer back to this specific question, yes, it does depend. But when you have smart people who get paid a lot of money with high bonuses and expensive houses and cars, they are responsible for making those decisions. And the CISO should be at the table. If she or he is not at the table, then shame on that organization and shame on the CISO as well, right? It takes two of those entities to come together and say, what's in the best interest of the organization? I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please go back to the chat and follow up.
I think
No,
they have
I'll
a
agree with
follow-up.
that.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jonathan.
I was going to say, I do think it depends on that industry, regulated industry. Some things are built in that way. Government contractors, sometimes they can't dictate how they want to set it up. Sometimes it's built into their contract with the federal government or state government or whatever government it is, of how their organization should be structured. So, in those cases, that's kind of one of those where, it's depending on where that contract states where that CISO should be at, based on, what the needs or the dictates of that higher organization is. I mean, for us, that's kind of how our CISO is built under the CIOs, because it's built into that contract that it should be organized that way.
Okay, great. I think that person that had asked the question earlier was just adding this to the question to say that, and also how mature the risk management cycle is. Is there a mature risk management function, internal audit function, etc.?
I don't think many organizations have a risk management program. Let's not even go to the mature piece of it. I don't even think they have a risk management program. And Chris is laughing. Chris, they're gonna cancel me very quickly, probably after this call. But that's all right. That's all right. They cancel me. It's the truth though. But I think that question brings up a very interesting point that kind of ties into what we're talking about here. It's really the responsibility of a company to define what risk is, and then after that, define the people that are going to take care of it. We're not even there yet. Like that's building. Those two pillars are building towards maturity, And if you poll 10 organizations, and I'm talking across the board, micro business to enterprise, and you say, hey, give me a snapshot of your enterprise risk management strategy and how it looks for the next 3 to 5 years, 8 out of 10 just can't even answer that question because they haven't prepared themselves for it. And that's a major problem, is because we are making everything about cybersecurity and risk that it's not. We go in 9,000 different directions with it and don't focus in on the basic tenet of, if we do not keep our people, I'll use a COBIT model. If we do not use our people, protect our people, our data, our infrastructure, our applications, our business is at risk to fold. Let's start there. How are we protecting all four of those aspects in our organization, and then we can start to mature from there. But that's the problem. Like, if we still can't hire correctly, if we still can't draw an org chart correctly for cybersecurity, we're nowhere near maturity, and we have to get back to the basics of what it is that we're trying to do, and then build out from there.
Okay, great.
I agree. I'm putting together a presentation I have to give to Isaka, and it's how do you present to the board? And if your board is not asking those questions, CISO should go to the board, talk to the board about risk. What is our threat landscape? That's one. How will the business be impacted by it? How much it will cost to mitigate it? What's the cost of not mitigating it? Right, and then you could go through everything else. But if that's not at the center of those conversations when it comes to risk management, then you're right. I think, and I've seen it, Paul, where organization, can I see a risk register? Huh? It's like the conversation is just like you can't go anywhere with the conversation because they don't have a process until
and the board
they do the process. So
yep, and the board wants you to talk in simple terms. Like, a lot of people get nervous when they get around the ivory tower and the ivory table and the suits and the $20,000 Rolex. Like, they get really nervous and they're like, I have to sound intelligent. One of my favorite movies is Margin Call, and one of the scenes in Margin Call is when they have a huge crisis and the CEO is sitting there and he's like, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old or a golden retriever. Like, don't zeros and ones end to death. Don't put the reports out that just show subnets and VLANs and things like that. Simplify as best as possible. And that's where they're very smart. I don't like this notion of saying, well, the board's stupid because they won't give me budget, or the board's stupid because they don't understand risk. That's not their job. You don't get to a board of directors by being an idiot. You get it by being really smart at something, but that doesn't mean that you're smart at everything. So they make their way by surrounding themselves with people that can take complex information and simplify it to where they can understand it, to then make business decisions off of that. And so, I'd encourage people that do present in board meetings or executive meetings, keep it as rudimentary and simple, and analogies, break it down simply, because that they just want to know, how do I not go to jail? Or how do I not close the doors of this business forever and lose millions upon millions of dollars? Map risk towards that. Start there.
Yeah, very important point. I think one of the questions coming out is, how do we actually deal with the challenges, bearing in mind that you have an existing, in many cases, going back to the Dillionaire report, based on the 38% that they have actually discovered in their report, in terms of having an organization that actually supports cybersecurity. How do organizations actually break their current organizational structure? Bearing in mind that you have companies operating over the years, and now you have cybersecurity, which has totally revolutionized everything that we are doing now in terms of business. How do you take this existing structure, then you incorporate a substructure, cybersecurity, within the overall operation? How do you actually create that alignment? What are the challenges, and how it is that you actually overcome and create that synergy? between these two.
I'll, Jonathan, do you want to go or do you want to take it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think I got a little bit of a delay here, so
Go ahead.
apologize if I step over someone. Yeah, I think that's the big challenge, and it comes to that fine balance of those archaic type of thought processes from people who have been in cybersecurity for 30 plus years, right? And they keep doing things a certain way. They like doing it, change. They're maybe willing to look at it. But then when you kind of bring on the flip side of kind of this younger generation that's coming up, who's very tech savvy, tech smart, but maybe needs some guidance and trying to find that good balance of between them finding a way to help express the same needs and the same concerns that both of these groups have, into finding a good consensus in the middle there, to that's really going to be the best way to kind of change that organization structure. And sometimes you might not need to change the structure. It's just changing that thought process to get people on board with at least the same thoughts, or at least going towards that same way. So that way, there can be good conversations, effective conversations in how to change the culture in the company, in the board, in the executive level of, you know, the importance of security is not just resting on the CISO or the CIO, right? I think it was what Chris said, that or maybe it was Paul, I can't remember which one, how it's should be a part of all of the different, C-suite team, in HR, in legal, in finance, everyone at that top level should be having some type of discussion on cybersecurity within their organization, right? Let's not just leave it up to the one person and maybe his smaller team to try to figure out how to secure a whole company's worth, because that's how we're going to get that burnout, and why so many CISOs are quitting and wanting to leave, or step down from that. They'll probably be happy to take, a few, some tens of thousands of dollars cut back to have less responsibility and stress off their shoulder.
Yeah, and I think Paul posted an article. I opened it, Paul. It's an article, the stress of the CISO. You see the guy with his head down, pulling his hair out, and I'm looking forward to reading it. But again, I think having that organizational structure that allows for that kind of that tweaking along the way is important. You have to be flexible, right, and rigid on certain things, but flexible enough to be able to adapt to the environment. Organizations used to say, we are in the business of maximizing profit. Well, guess what? Millennials today are saying, no, you're not. You are in the business of maximizing profit to the extent where you do not harm others and you do not harm the environment. So now, because if everyone is maximizing, you're going to destroy the environment. So that's just an anecdotal piece to say, you now have to change within your environment, and your culture has to have that flexibility to adapt to those types of things in the market, much less specifically what we're talking about here, which is how do we get the CISO and the business aligned, right? So if your organization is very rigid, like the IBM, like the guy, no, don't dig on IBM, but that rigid structure, that's going to have to start becoming more placable, right? You have to be able to dance and go with the flow to the extent it doesn't harm your business and it doesn't harm your profits or your shareholders. But I think flexibility within your environment is key. I'll go on mute.
Very great points. I mean, inputs, guys, and for sure, guys, there is no ideal. I mean, approach to actually having this in place, and there will always be many challenges. Organizations differ. I mean, in terms of their structure, the stakeholders play a very important role in actually determining the sort of cybersecurity structure that you have within an organization. So there's always going to be a lot of challenges as it relates to this, and we are not saying that there's an ideal, I mean, structure that one can actually develop, but Despite the various challenges, then one has to be strategic, one has to be holistic in their approach in terms of actually being in a position to, going back to the point, being able to communicate in the simplest terms so that the powers that be within the organization can understand the importance of actually having that alignment that supports cybersecurity. So there you have it, guys. I mean, that's the end of our weekly cybersecurity article review in 30 minutes. I mean, having looked at the importance of having an organizational structure that aligns with helping cybersecurity programs achieve intended business or organizational objectives. So, see you same time, same place. Until then, guys, have a wonderful rest of the day.